My name is Stephen J. Abramson. Today is February 17th, 2010, and today I have the great pleasure of interviewing actor Richard Chamberlain for the Archive of American Television, and we are in West Hollywood, California.
It's like doing a big movie.
So here we go. We'll start right at the beginning. What was your name at birth?
George Richard Chamberlain. I was called George because they wanted to call me Dick, so they named me Richard, but my grandfather wanted me to be named after him, George, so they put George in front. I've never been called George.
What about nicknames? Did you have nicknames growing up?
Dick. No, Dickie at first, then Dick, then Richard. I was known as Chambo in college for some reason.
I like that. When and where were you born?
I was born in L.A. in, do you want the year? 1934.
Okay. A month and day, or you're going to tell us
March
that?
31st.
Okay. What was your father's name?
Charles.
And what did he do?
He was a salesman in a small company that made market fixtures, all the furniture that goes in supermarkets. And he eventually took over the company, a small company.
And your mother's name?
Elsa.
And what did she do?
She was a housewife. She was a very beautiful, very talented woman. She played the piano beautifully. She sang beautifully. She was an actress for a while, in college and stuff like that. And she could have been really something professionally, but she was, in those days, she became a housewife.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have an older brother. And
his name?
Bill.
Okay. What were you interested in growing up? What kind of activities, hobbies?
I was interested in being in the movies. I was happy. I was a happy kid till I was 5, I think, and had to go to school, and then I became an unhappy kid. I hated school. I loved the freedom of youth, extreme youth, and I wasn't a very good student. But tell me the question one more time.
Well, activities when you were growing up.
Yes,
Things
yes.
you like.
Oh well, we were free and easy in the neighborhoods in those days. People didn't kidnap you and shoot you. So even as a little tiny kid, we were all over the place. My friends and I, and totally free to roam wherever we wanted. And played the usual kid games and stuff. In school, I liked art class and I liked music class and all that, but I was not a very excited student.
Living so close to Hollywood, was there a lure for you at an early age, just because the proximity were so close?
Well, yes, it was a double thing. Not only were we kind of around the movie business a bit and loved going to the movies. Gosh, we loved going to the movies. But I wasn't that attracted to real life. I liked fantasy life. I liked role playing and all that stuff. So I was really set up to be an actor because that's where I was happiest, being essentially somebody else.
All those movies you saw, anything have a great impact for you, either movies or actors at that time?
I liked fantastic movies. I hated Bette Davis, I remember that. Apart from hating Bette Davis, I liked just about everything in the movies. Adventure films and stuff like that. There are a lot of good war movies back then because there was a war. I was omnivorous.
What high school did you go to?
Beverly Hills High School. I grew up in Beverly Hills, but I hasten to say on the wrong side of Wilshire, on the wrong side of Beverly Drive. We were in that very normal neighborhood, extremely normal, as a matter of fact.
And did you act in high school?
Yeah. I remember I did several plays. The one I remember most was I was Papa in I Remember Mama. And I was so terrified. I was so nervous. And I remember when the curtain went up, my first line, I think, was, "Good morning, Mama," and I couldn't stop smiling. My face just got stuck like that. It was very funny. But yes, I was very shy, very inhibited, but I was also very attracted to doing the plays and things.
And where did you go to college?
Pomona College in Claremont, California. Wonderful, wonderful small college. And they had a terrific drama department. because of my shyness, etc., I decided I probably would never make it as an actor. So being a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Practical person, I decided that I would major in art and become an artist and therefore have a wonderful career. But I spent most of my time moonlighting in the drama department. We had a wonderful, wonderful director and teacher in the drama department named Virginia Princehouse Allen. And she lured me into trying out for a play my freshman year, and I stayed doing plays all the time and did the rest of my work kind of on the run.
Sometimes college or college theater can be kind of an idyllic setting.
Oh,
was
idyllic.
it during that time that you seriously considered continuing as being an actor for a career?
Well, I would love to have seriously considered it, but as I say, I was a scared actor, and I remember I used to have to rehearse everything I was going to do in rehearsal before. Usually rehearsal is a place you try stuff, but I was too scared to try anything, so I would plan everything beforehand. And it wasn't until my senior year I did Blunchley in Arms and the Man, the Shaw play, and somehow took off and was good in it. I mean, in a collegiate sense. And the audience went crazy, and I got, this stop the show. He has this wonderful exit, and it kind of stopped the show. And I thought, man, I can do it. So I threw art out the window and decided to become an actor.
And it being Hollywood, did talent agents come to college
Yes.
productions, and did anyone notice you?
Yes. Some people from Fox. I think it was Fox.
Or Paramount, was it? Or
No, it was Paramount. Absolutely, it was Paramount. Yes, it was Paramount. They sent some talent people, and they actually interviewed me, and they actually were going to sign me to a 7-year contract upon graduation. And I was trying to negotiate. They said, "Well, kid, you'd be lucky to get $5 a day." And I said, "Well, I'd really, really like to have 10." And "Oh, well, I think you probably should start it." But during the negotiations, I was drafted into the Army, and so I was saved from making a disastrous deal with Paramount. And I was then in the Army for 2 years.
where did you go during the service?
Korea was, thank God, after the war. We were the peacekeepers, and I was there for 16 months and then 2 years altogether.
Did the experience in the Army change you?
Well, not a lot. I learned to stand in line. I can stand in line for hours now, quite happily. I learned that I could survive intense boredom. I was a company clerk in Camp Hovey, about 30 miles from Seoul, and that sounds kind of twee, but it's not. It was a very complicated job. And I sort of threw myself into the work, weekends, day, night, just to kind of keep from going crazy, and became indispensable, and ended up a sergeant in 2 years, which is almost unheard of.
So all this time you were overseas, you said it was 18 months or 2 years? 2 years out?
16 months in Korea, and then 2 years altogether.
And was this the first time you were really out of LA?
Yeah, I think so. I never thought I'd travel. My family never traveled. I refused to learn even Spanish in high school because what good is it going to do? They're never going to come here, ha ha ha, and I'm never going to go there. But
In Korea, did you still have your eye on acting though? At least down the road?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Way in the background of my mind.
So when you got back here, how did you get your first agent?
That's interesting. My father was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had been a drunk for the first 14 years, and then he became this incredible guru in AA. And he was friends with Jack Bailey, who did Queen for a Day. And I had lunch with them once, and Jack Bailey's, this was due to my father, which I'm very grateful for, and with Jack Bailey and Jack Bailey's agent, Alan Bernard, who was an agent at MCA, which was the biggest agency in the world. And so Alan Bernard set up an interview for me to do a scene. I mean, he wasn't the least bit interested, but he did it as a favor to Jack. And so I did the scene for Monique James and Ina Bernstein there at MCA, and they liked it. And they signed me. And I had done some interviews and things before that with a kind of temporary agent, and always been too scared in the interviews to really get anything. But when the MCA was sending me, I got a completely different kind of reception at these job interviews, and started to get work in television. It was quite amazing.
And Monique James was a huge agent at that time, right?
Huge and wonderful. And that's when agents loved starting out young people. She was fascinated doing that, and she's really good at it. I'm not sure many agents do that anymore.
So when you were sent out, what was your first role? Your first
yes,
professional?
It was a morning's work. My first role was a morning's work on Gunsmoke. Yeah, I think it was just one day. I was this kind of upstart kid, kind of young cowboy who caused a lot of trouble and then disappeared, I guess. But I had just this one morning's work, and I didn't know anything about film technique. I didn't know anything about hitting marks and all that sort of thing. But I learned really fast. I was extremely focused and was so tired. I think I was in bed for a week after that. I had just totally exhausted myself in half a day.
What do you remember about, I mean, all your experience before then was, basically on a stage, and there you are on a set. Did anyone take you under their wing? Do you remember your first feelings when you just arrived and you actually stepped out to do your part? I mean, was it frightening or? Being
rather shy and withdrawn still, I've gotten out a little bit, but I also had another side that thought, I can do this. It's interesting, I don't know where that came from. But I just watched and I kept my eyes open and followed directions, and I don't recall anyone really saying, dear boy, like Ray Massey did, for instance, when we were doing Kildare. He was wonderful to me. But I don't recall anybody being particularly helpful, but they did tell me what to do, and I did it, and it was okay.
Did you come away from that first role on Gunsmoke motivated or certain that this is what you want to do?
Oh, I knew it was what I wanted to do. There was nothing else in the universe that I wanted to do.
And you had a guest starring role on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Tell me how that came to be.
I'm just going to have lunch with Norman Lloyd, dinner, in a couple days, tomorrow, I think. And he was the producer of the Hitchcock Presents. And his daughter, I was in acting class with. And she suggested me for this role to her father, and he brought me in and gave me the part. And it was a chance to act with Raymond Massey. It was my second job, I think, and it was a good part. And it was largely because of that Ray, about, 6 or 8 months later, okayed me for Kildare, because he had approval of whoever was to play Kildare. So that was extraordinarily fortunate.
What was that experience like? Did you play Raymond Massey's character's son or something?
Yes, I was one of his sons. Yes.
With such a veteran actor, what was that like for you? Meeting Raymond Massey and then working with him that first time.
Well, he was just so sweet. We got on right away, and he was so kind to me, all through Kildare. And I was very, very green. I screwed up right and left, and had to have take after take after take sometimes, and things like that. And he never even looked impatient. It was extraordinary. No, he was wonderful, and it was great working with him. And he's a very giving actor and all that, so it made me feel relatively at home.
Now, the character of Dr. Kildare is right at the top of the most popular television characters ever. How did you get cast in that role?
Funnily enough, I had done a pilot film for MGM called The Paradise Kid about, a year before they were casting Kildare. And it didn't sell because Westerns were on the way up and stuff. And I'm not sure I was any good in it. But anyway, they were searching and searching and searching, MGM, for somebody to play Kildare. And they tested everybody in town and didn't find what they wanted. And they pulled out this old pilot film from the vault and looked at it and thought, that's it, that's him. I don't know why, but anyway, they did, and thank goodness. And soon I was, working regularly. And
this was MGM, and you were already under contract? Is that right?
Yeah, they put me under contract.
Okay, then.
For a regular 7-year contract. I was one of the last contract players there.
And any other hoops you had to jump through to be cast? Did anybody have a final approval on you?
Um, I don't know exactly what the process was.
Was Raymond Massey already cast?
Oh, he was already cast, and yes, he had final approval. And because we'd worked together and gotten on, he said okay. So it was great.
That's great good fortune too.
Oh boy, I'll say I've been so lucky.
Um, okay. Dr. Kildare premiered in 1961. What was the premise of the show?
Well, it's about a young intern being mentored by the old wise doctor, Dr. Gillespie, played by Raymond Massey. And it was about his experiences as a very young, very green doctor in a very big and very marvelous hospital. And Kildare would get much more involved in his patients' lives than normally doctors do. And consequently, there was a lot of drama in his life. And funnily enough, medical school enrollments had been going down. And after Kildare and Casey were on, they shot up because everybody thought they were going to be having this wonderful dramatic time working with movie stars.
MGM had done a number of films, Dr. Kildare films with Lou Ayres and
Yes.
Dr. Kildare.
12,
Had you seen those movies?
Oh yeah, I saw them. I think when they came out. You know, I've been around for a while, and they were terrific. They were really good.
Did they inform you at all on how you even approached this, or
No.
did you?
No, because he was so different from Lionel Barrymore, and I was so different from Lou Ayres, that no, we just started sort of from scratch.
Okay. And the character of Dr. Kildare, what would you say? What were his strengths, and what were his weaknesses?
He was a very 50s guy, which made it perfect for me to play because so was I. Very conservative, very serious about his work, loved his patients, terrific bedside manner because he cared. He really cared about his patients. I would think he was extremely savvy medically, learned very fast, was an excellent doctor, and do you want to wait for that? It's going to ring 4 times.
Okay.
So Dr. Kildare had many strengths, including his expertise as a young doctor. He also had perhaps a fault of getting too involved with his patients and too involved in their lives sometimes for the general medical protocol. Other weaknesses, we never dwelt on his weaknesses in the play, only his strengths. I can't think of any other weaknesses apart from his naivete and inexperience as a young human being.
What parts of yourself did you bring to the character?
Well, as I say, I brought this 50s personality. I grew up in a family in which we all pretended to be perfect, and we all decided that if you don't challenge me, I won't challenge you. You know, it's that kind of thing. So I went through life pretending to be perfect. And that helped me play Dr. Kildare because he was sort of close to perfect. It took me a long time to get over that. It's not a good way to live your life, but it certainly worked for Kildare. So I think that probably is the main thing I brought to him. I do like people and care about people and do have a certain natural kind of empathy, I think.
How different were you from the character?
Oh my God. I would never have had the courage to become a doctor. Never. Imagine having that kind of responsibility for someone else's life. I couldn't do that. It never even occurred to me that I'd want to have children, for instance, for a similar reason, that I was so unfamiliar with myself that the idea of raising a child, I just wouldn't have known where to begin. You know, I see some parents who are so themselves and so wonderfully close and easy and spontaneous with our kids. I wouldn't have been as a young person. Um, so that.
Well, was there a pilot? Was there a pilot and a waiting period, or was it just a go?
No, there was a, well, a sort of pilot film. There was a bit, but I think they had an order before that happened. The pilot was really wonderful. Beverly Garland was the maniacal, a wonderful patient who caused us a lot of trouble, and Boris Segal directed, and he was terrific. I remember, you know, there were certain scenes that I found very difficult. I was very, very green, and would ask to do it over and over and over. And Boris, for the first 3 days about it, was okay, and then finally he said, "Richard, the honeymoon's over. You know, get with it." And I did, pretty much.
Was that kind of a wake-up call? I mean,
Yeah, it was a wake-up call.
When you, I mean, here you are cast in the title character, the starring role in a huge show based on almost a franchise too. When did you realize it had become the phenomenon that it became?
Well, it was hugely successful right from the beginning, and shortly all over the world it was hugely successful. And it was my ultimate absolute dream come true. It was everything I had ever dreamt of for my own happy life and creativity and all that stuff. It was a phenomenal stroke of excellent good fortune. But the reason I might have gotten a little attitude, you know, knowing how successful we were. But the fact was, we were working so hard. We made 36 the first year, 34 the second year. I mean, the babies make, you know, 22 shows now. And then the studio, I was under contract to MGM, they would put me in little films in between, so I never got any time off. And if there was a week someplace, they would send me to New York or Philadelphia or something to do publicity stuff. And so I was working, and I would go to class afterwards. I took ballet class, I took singing lessons and stuff, you know, after work. I was one busy guy. And I also had a couple of friends who would go, "Oh, come off it," you know, if I got big-headed at all. So I kind of escaped what apparently can happen to some young actors these days. I've heard complaints about some young actors who think they're really hot stuff and can be rude and demanding and all that.
When you started, this was not only television but series television, and you were still young. What did you not know about acting that you had to learn for television?
My emotions were somewhat difficult to get to access. I remember there were a couple of times when I had to cry. I had lost a patient, and the stuff I had to go through with myself to get myself to the point of tears was just phenomenal. I was thinking and doing and stuff. Spontaneity was not my strong point. Not that I was never spontaneous, but mostly I would calculate what I was going to do pretty carefully before doing the scene. And that actually lasted through a great deal of my career. And it's only been, I don't know, the last 10 years or 15 years maybe, that I've been able to trust myself enough to really listen and really respond. It's not that I never did it, but I did it less than probably I would have liked to. So I think I had to learn much more about how to be myself before I could become fully a good actor.
On stage, you go from beginning to end. Television and films, yes. It's out of order, yes. Out of sequence, yes. You know, emotional, humorous, whatever. How fast did you pick that up?
Well, fairly fast. It's the most peculiar game, because if you've worked in the theater and had 4 weeks rehearsal and gone from beginning to end, etc., that's a wonderful luxury that, of course, you don't have at all in film. And you begin to, your imagination begins to learn the game of having to weep at your wife's funeral before you've even met the actress who plays your wife, things like that. So you have to imagine all that, and it's a very fun game, in fact, to play, the movie acting game, and you're playing to a machine. It's very odd, but very, very exciting once you get the hang of it.
Now, a big part of medical shows was obviously the medical jargon and the technique and terminology. What kind of a challenge was that for you to be a believable doctor?
We always had wonderful technical advisors, really good guys. And we had much less jargon than they have now, for instance, in the ER, where it's just all this. I don't know how they learn that stuff. I had a scene once, a long scene of medical dialogue in Raymond Massey's office with a bunch of character actors playing, with marvelous actors playing various kinds of medical officials. And in the middle of this long scene, which I had learned very, very carefully, there was the word epinephrine. Well, it looked like epinephrine to me. So I learned it epinephrine. And through the first rehearsals, I said epinephrine. Nobody stopped me. And finally, before the first take, the script girl came up and said, "Oh, by the way, it's epinephrine." What? Why didn't you? And so we were doing the scene, and every time I came to epinephrine, I stopped cold. I just couldn't get my... And it took us all morning to shoot this scene. Anyway, that's my lack of talent for technical jargon. But Ray, as I said, he never looked impatient at all. He was really a sweetheart.
Tell me more about working with Raymond Massey for the course of now, well, this is going to be a 5-year run.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like, both professionally and personally?
Yes. Professionally, it was professional. And we had a lot of jokes. We had a lot of good times on the set. A lot of giggles and stuff. But we were very serious with each other during the scenes and all. He and Dorothy, his wonderful wife, sort of took me in as a good friend. And we spent a lot of time together. They would, when they would have people like Jack Hawkins or Cedric Hardwicke or something over for lunch, they would invite me and I would sit there and listen to all these tales of the theater. It was just amazing. It was amazing. Ray was, I didn't have a very good relationship with my father, my own father. In fact, it was not a good relationship at all. And Ray was a kind of substitute father to me. He was everything I would ever have dreamt of for a really wonderful, caring, expert, super father. And Dorothy was terrific. Dorothy was one of the first corporate lawyers, female, in the world. She was a New Englander, very tough, very bright. And if she didn't like you, forget it. Well, it was true actually about Ray, but especially Dorothy, but they both liked me and we got on great.
What did you learn from Ray?
Ray had size and certainly gravitas, but he had size as an actor. He was a big actor. He was a big man. And I suppose that when parts requiring that came along, that having worked with him and sort of absorbed him, it was helpful to me to be bigger than I am. He was incredibly professional. One of the things I learned doing Kildare, which was beastly hard work because I was in practically everything, was how to be a pro. I was on time, I hit my marks, I knew my lines, and I gave the best I could give at the time, which sometimes wasn't bad. And he had a kind of joie de vivre. I know he and Dorothy used to have lunch once a week at the Polo Lounge, and they would often invite me, and we would drink a lot of Manhattans and get a little drunk and have all his stories and all the gossip and carrying on. He had fun while he was acting, and I think that probably gave me a clue.
Any techniques that you learned as an actor from him, or just observing him?
I'm not aware of learning technically from Ray because he didn't seem to work technically. He once described me as a good technical actor, which I thought was a somewhat limited praise, but praise nonetheless.
But he never pulled you aside and said, hey, maybe you want to try like this? Or
No, he never did that. He never, that I can recall, ever said, gave me advice in that way. He certainly gave me advice by example. But no, he treated me like a completely on his par professional, which I was very grateful for, even when I was green.
To what do you attribute the wild popularity of Dr. Kildare?
I think people are fascinated by the medical profession. They're fascinated by situations of life and death. Everybody knows that someday you'll get sick or break something or have a problem and need a doctor. And people find doctors like Gillespie and Kildare wonderful because they care. They care about you. They listen to you. They help you. And all those things, I think, made the show very, very attractive. Also, it was very well produced and very well written for its time. And we had amazing guest stars and amazing guest directors. But mostly, I think it's in the human realm. It's a situation which people would die to be in, if they were going to die or close to it, with getting the best possible care from people who really cared about them.
Now, another really big medical show, Ben Casey, premiered, I believe, the same year.
Yeah, we were neck and neck all the time for 5 years.
I know you were a busy guy, but did you ever have a chance to even check that show out?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yes. We were on different nights. I often watched it. I remember that Kim Stanley did one, and I was fascinated by that. I thought it was a terrific show.
What would you say is the essential difference between Dr. Kildare and Ben Casey?
Well, he was gruffer, heavier, more serious, hairier chested. All in all, a bit butcher than Dr. Kildare. And the show, I think, was sometimes dealt with darker dramas than our show.
At that time, we're talking early 60s, how was the medical profession regarded at that time? And did Dr. Kildare reflect that?
As far as I know, the medical profession during the 60s was held in extremely high regard. Yes, Dr. Kildare certainly reflected that. We were, in a sense, demigods. Exceedingly fine, exceedingly capable people, which one doesn't always find in the hospital, especially nowadays that things are sort of overcrowded.
As a show, how would you say Dr. Kildare changed the television landscape in the 60s?
How did we change the landscape? I have no idea. I've never thought about that. We certainly put medical shows on the map. I mean, there have been thousands of them since, and very good ones, as a matter of fact. We might have been the last gasp of the sort of 50s culture on television, because that certainly isn't the character of say, ER, which is rough and tumble, and they do about eight stories or 10 stories all at once. We had one story and a sort of sub-story, period. And now they tell dozens of stories and do it well.
What was it like being not just a TV star, but also a heartthrob, even a teen idol? What was that like for you?
My self-esteem deep down was low, for various reasons. And so having that kind of public adulation was just wonderful. It was like a wonderful medicine. It was wonderful. It was everything I'd ever dreamt of. And being thought to be very attractive and everything, I thought was just great. It was great.
Was there any moment you remember where you were really aware that you were this famous? I mean, was there an incident? Did you run into people? I mean, you're on a set a lot. That's different than being in the public.
Yes. Oh, I used to get chased around supermarkets, and girls would often chase me. I had a Stingray, convertible Stingray. And girls would often chase me around the hills and stuff, and I would speed ahead, and I usually managed to escape. I was traveling with my parents once, and I think we were, where were we? We were in we were in Switzerland on some mountaintop, and somebody came up and asked for my autograph, and my father said, "Now I know you've really made it." No, I used to get enormous amounts of fan mail and presents, all kinds of presents and handmade things and stuff.
What kind of fan mail? What did they say?
Oh, we love you, Dr. Kildare, and will you ever give us a phone call and blah blah blah, and please send us a picture and stuff like that. Very sweet.
Did anything ever move you to respond, or was it such a huge quantity you really couldn't?
And some weird ones with naked pictures and stuff, but that didn't happen all that often. Excuse me.
Were you ever able to, with that quantity, to respond to any of them? I mean, actually, or was it just so overwhelming?
A tiny bit. I was getting 12,000 letters a week.
Right.
Are you kidding? And I was working, 24 hours a day. So I didn't respond much. I used to sign an awful lot of stuff. And occasionally, when a letter would be really wonderful, or a little present, a little handmade present was great, I would respond personally. Yes.
You've talked a little bit before about kind of being aware of building an image, or at least being self-aware of when you were in Dr. Kildare to kind of establish yourself. What were you thinking? What were you aware of at that time about trying? This is the big beginning, really.
Yes.
That you really, what were your goals then?
Well, I wanted to do everything. I had done a great variety of plays, however well, I don't know, in college. And I wanted to do classics, I wanted to work in the theater, I wanted to do movies, I wanted to play bad guys and good guys, I wanted to do everything. And by the 5th year of Kildare, I was really longing to get out of it. Because I wanted to do other things. And the show had gotten a little repetitive, and how many ways can you say, "How are you feeling?" I can't remember where we.
Well, in that your persona, starting out with Dr. Kildare, was certainly as.
Yes.
You were pretty well established as a romantic male lead.
I was established very firmly in the American mind as this clean-cut, good-looking, leading man, very serious, very attractive guy. And I'd been in their living rooms for 5 years, and everybody wanted me to stay the same. And I knew I didn't want to stay the same, but I didn't know how to break out of it. And I got this idea that I should go to England. Cedric Hardwicke had once said to me at Raymond Massey's house, you become a star before you've learned how to act. And he said it kindly, but it really sunk in. And I very much wanted to go to England and go to a drama school and all that, and play and rep and all that sort of thing. And it wasn't until just after Kildare finished in '67 when I did Petulia with Richard Lester and Julie Christie and all those people. And there was he pretended to be British, and of course Julie was, and the crew was mostly British, and I thought, I really got to do this. I've really got to go to England and really, really, really learn my craft. And I did in early '68. I went to England and thought I'd go to drama. And for better or worse, I got a fabulous job practically as I stepped off the plane in London. My agents there, William Morris, found me Portrait of a Lady, the Henry James novel, and they wanted me to play Ralph Touchett. The director was not convinced, and I had lunch with him and was as, period as I could be, and he hired me, and it was an astounding experience working with these superb, superb people. It was 6 hours, and we'd rehearse and shoot it, pretty much shoot it live, not in front of an audience, of course. But wonderful, wonderful cast. And I was pretty good in it, and got good reviews. And it was because of that that I was asked to do Hamlet at Birmingham Rep, which was an amazing surprise. And I did it. Yes, and that was kind of what blasted me out of the extreme gravity of Dr. Kildare. And people back in the States were saying, he played Hamlet? What? He played, Ralph Touchett? And it kind of changed the way people felt about me.
When you were so very famous during Dr. Kildare, and as this, a lot of young women wanted you. I mean, you were desirable to them. In your 2003 memoir, Shattered Love, you publicly talk about, your life professionally and personally, as an actor who happens to be gay. What were you dealing with then at that time, about the idea of that might be public at that time, how that might affect you?
I was dealing with two things in terms of being gay. One was a kind of self-dislike, which I'd grown up in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when being gay was not an option. It simply was not an option. It was the worst possible thing you could be. And so I pretended to be somebody else, and that's the way I lived my life, pretending to be somebody else. So there was the problem of my own self-dislike. And there was the terrible, terrible danger of being outed, because I was a romantic lead, for God's sake. That was my whole career, practically. And to be outed at that time would have been disaster. So I had that fear, and I also feared that I was a sort of unworthy, something terribly wrong with me person. And it wasn't until I was about 68 when I was writing that book that finally that area of self-dislike vanished completely. I mean, I had done a lot of work. I'd had a lot of therapy. I'd done a lot of spiritual work. I had wonderful friends, etc. But it wasn't until that late in my life that suddenly all that fear, all that self-dislike, it was as if an angel had put her hand on my head, it's going to make me cry, and said, it's over, all that part is over. All that negative stuff is over. Being gay is one of the least interesting facts you can know about a person. It just doesn't, it's not even interesting. It's so blah, it's so benign. And soon the book was published, and I was out soon after that. I was out on national television, and of course all they wanted to talk about was what it was like being a gay actor in Hollywood. And I was fine. I had no fear left at all. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and people were so open and friendly and sweet, and nobody threw rocks at me, and it was great.
I would say over the years to the present day, a lot of progress has been made in terms of how the public
Not enough.
regards. But that's why I'm leading to this question. Today, in 2010, what would you advise a young actor who happens to be a gay man if he is known for romantic parts, romantic leads, in this day and age?
I would tend to say, keep your mouth shut. I would tend to say, don't talk about it. Unless somehow you're so free with it, you're so without fear, you're so okay, that somehow that okayness comes through and nobody cares and it's all right. But I would say if there's any fear, if you've got any fears in you, don't talk about it, because that will communicate and people will perhaps not accept you as this romantic leading man as easily. Right. I'd say be careful.
Let's talk a little about your singing career, which was, I guess, jump-started with Dr. Kildare. How did that happen?
Well,
you had some hit records out there.
I was taking singing lessons a lot, and for a long time, mainly to just develop my voice, really. The studio came to me in, I don't know, 62 or something, and said, let's make some records. And I said, great. And we did. We made several albums of mostly standards that mostly were owned by MGM, so they didn't have to pay royalties. And my singing teacher, Carolyn Trochanovsky, and I worked very, very, very hard on this stuff. I wasn't a natural singer because I still had a certain inhibition that didn't lend itself to singing. Singing requires a great deal of freedom. But I had a nice voice, and I was reasonably musical, and the records weren't bad.
And your biggest hit was based on the theme song, is that right?
3 Stars Will Shine Tonight, probably. But pardon me, the record sold very well.
Were there lyrics before that, or were they written
I have a
for your record?
I have a feeling they were written for the recording. Yeah.
And do well, you were doing, I mean, back then a season was, like you said, over 30 episodes, 36 episodes?
36, 34, 32.
That's a lot of episodes over 5 years.
Yeah.
Do any favorites stand out for you?
I loved one with Suzanne Plachette called Shining Image. A fan sent me a DVD of it recently, and it wasn't quite as wonderful as I remembered. Most people's favorite is one I did with Bette Mimure called Tiger Tiger. It was a 2-parter, and she was so gorgeous. She played this surfer with an epileptic surfer, which is a funny idea if you're thinking about it in terms of show business. And she actually died in the film having a seizure as she was surfing a wave. And I had to run into the water and carry her out and all that stuff. And that touched people. And, we had this love affair. And she died. And
I remember that being a
yeah.
huge 2-parter.
Yeah.
As your clout progressed through the series, did you have input into any of the scripts, any of the stories?
Oh, I tried. I really tried. I used to go in and have meetings with the producers with piles of scripts. And I said, look at this scene. When is he going to grow up? He does something so dumb here. And when is he going to grow up? He's been an intern now for 4 years. And they went, oh, yes, we see. But they didn't change anything. I mean, why kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs? And they were, of course, quite right. No, I had almost no input whatsoever.
Any other favorite guest stars?
Yeah, Gloria Swanson stands out because she was so extraordinary and looking great, by the way. But she was, this incredibly successful in silent movies, especially. And she had done Sunset Boulevard by then and all that. And the first morning, she was in bed. She was ill as the character, in bed. And she, at about the middle of this big scene she was having, she said, Helen, bring me my breakfast. And everything stopped. Time is money in television. You don't stop for anything. And everything stopped, and this maid brought in a huge breakfast tray, all silver and all that stuff. And she proceeded to lie in her hospital bed eating this breakfast. And this happened every single morning. And nobody had the nerve, because she was a spitfire if she wanted to be, to say, let's hurry this up. And there was another thing about her that I remember. She became friends with a patient, a young woman in the hospital who was dying. She didn't know she was dying, but they became quite friendly. And up till that point, Swanson had been, the movie star and the diva and all that. And so she went in to this dying girl's bedroom, knowing at this point that she was dying. And we rehearsed the scene a couple of times, and about the 3rd rehearsal, she just let loose, and the tears, and she was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And the director said, okay, cut, that was great, now let's shoot it. And Swanson said, what? We just shot it. And they said, no, that was rehearsal. And she could never get it back. And it kind of broke my heart that she was still good, but she could never get that real, beautiful acting level back. I felt bad. It was one of the last things she ever did.
When the show was...
We had Lauren Bacall and all kinds of neat people.
Any other favorites you want to tell about?
John Cassavetes, Gina Rollins, all. No, I'm not a good anecdote person.
Well, that was a great one.
That was a good one.
When Dr. Kildare ended, did you feel like it was the right time? Were you ready for it to end?
Yes, I was. I was delightfully happy to be free for about 3 weeks. And then that actor thing happened. God, is the phone ever going to ring again? Am I ever going to work again? Oh, Jesus, my cushy job is gone. What's going to happen? And then this musical came up, The Breakfast at Tiffany's with Mary Tyler Moore. And I was thrilled that happened, which turned out to be the biggest flop that ever hit Broadway. But it was really fun for a while. But no, I was delighted that it was over. Partly because I was tired, and partly because I wanted to do all kinds of other things. But then the fear set in, but then work started to come.
Breakfast at Tiffany's was Broadway bound and tried out in a couple of cities, I think in
Yes.
Boston, and then went to New York. And I understand that it lasted for 4 previews and then closed.
Yes.
But despite that, what was it like working with Mary Tyler Moore?
Oh, she was wonderful. She was absolutely wonderful. And we had a good relationship as far as I could tell. And I didn't realize the show was headed for the rocks. The gypsies all knew, and the people, other people knew. I mean, it was being directed by and written by.
Edward Albee?
Edward.
He did a pass on it, or?
No, by Abe Burrows, who was one of the greats. And in Boston, we had played Philadelphia, and in Boston, it finally got through to me that we were in trouble, and certainly to everybody else. And they brought in Edward Albee to rewrite the show. Well, you know, that was a very strange choice, and he did, and it made a very sort of dark musical out of it. And we closed for a couple of weeks and opened to previews in New York. And this dark musical, and nobody had ever seen a dark musical before, and the audiences just hated it. They hated it. They'd shout at us. They'd walk out. They really hated us, and Mary used to go off stage and weep. It was just an awful, awful, awful experience. And we closed. David Merrick closed the show after 4 previews with an enormous advance sale. Gave all the money back, and we closed, and it sort of broke my heart.
And that was, I believe, 1966.
Yeah.
And then you moved to England in 1968. Why did you move to England?
Well, I had done Petulia in '67 in San Francisco, you know, at the height of the hippie thing, and we were living on houseboats in Sausalito and all that. It was so great, and everybody was young and everybody was beautiful, and it was before the drugs, you know, kind of weighed it all down. But I wanted so badly to get some real basic training in acting that it was at that time doing Petulia, really, and being around all the British people, that I thought, I've just got to go. I've got to go. And I got on a plane and went.
So was it the stage? Was it the British stage that attracted you?
I was thinking about drama school, and yes, I would love to have acted on the stage, but I started getting work. I started getting on-the-job training, and it was wonderful. It was maybe even better than going to drama school, because I had the opportunity to work with excellent, first-rate people, and Glenda Jackson and people like, it was just wonderful directors and great projects, and I learned enormously during that period. I was there for 4.5 years.
One of your projects was the BBC miniseries Portrait of a Lady.
Yes.
How was that for you? What kind of experience was that?
It was a gift from the divine. James Kechlin Jones was directing, wonderful, wonderful director. Suzanne Neve was playing the lady. Beatrix Lehman was playing my mother. Oh, first rate, absolutely wonderful people. And the rehearsals were exacting and exciting, and the actual shooting was unbelievably exciting, really. And I felt that I was really getting somewhere, really accomplishing something. And I loved the character, Ralph Touchett. I loved the story. It was a great experience.
And you played Hamlet for the Birmingham Rep.
Yes.
And you got critical praise.
Well.
And I think you were the first American since John Barrymore
Yes,
in
I didn't know that at the
1929.
time. Yes.
How did that feel?
Well, we were at the Birmingham Rep. It's miles away from London. I thought we were safe there. You know, if I bombed, nobody would ever know. And I told Peter Hughes, he saw Portrait of a Lady. He was watching it with his wife. And he said to her, you know, I think he could play Hamlet. And his wife fell off the sofa laughing. And, but he stuck with it. And he called me and said, do you want to, they needed some box office at the time. So he called and said, do you want to do it? And I said, yes. And so I started, this was long before the production. And I started working with coaches and things. And they all said, Richard, don't embarrass yourself. And I finally turned it down. And I woke up in the middle of the night, just before the 11th hour, going, I've got to do it, I've got to do it, I've got to do it. Sweating, literally sweating. Got to do it. Talking out loud. What? And so I called my agent and said, get me back in, get me back in. I said, if Peter will work with me for weeks before we do it, and then if we have a at least 6 weeks rehearsal, I'll give it a go. And so I went, he was directing, Peter was directing Hadrian VII in New York at the time, and I went to New York and we worked constantly in New York. And then I went and lived with him and his wife for a while in England, and we worked in a neighbor's garage day after day after day after day. And then we got into rehearsal. And rehearsals weren't going very well, and he called me in after about the fourth week, and he said to his office, and he said, Richard, it's not happening. I can't fire you. What do we do? And I said, I think it'll start to come together when we get into run-throughs. And it did. It started to come together. But I'll never forget opening night. Oh my God. Oh, then just 2 days before opening, I found out that all the London critics were coming for Blood yet. You know, who is this American pretty boy interloper playing Hamlet at the Birmingham Rep, which is one of the great rep companies ever. And so I was so scared. And opening night, the tension in the house was tangible. You could touch it. It was extraordinary. And in the first scene, I went up. I forgot the first scene with Horatio. You know, when they say they've seen the ghost and everything. I went up. First of all, I discovered I couldn't bend my knees. My voice was up here someplace because I was so scared. My knees wouldn't bend, and I was walking in this funny way. And then I went up and forgot, and my fellow actors were whispering in my ears, but I was so scared I couldn't hear what they were saying. And it finally got back on the beam and got through the opening night. And apparently they thought this eccentric performance was interesting because I got reasonably good reviews. You know, they didn't say I was the new Olivier, but they said this is an actor worth watching.
Did playing Hamlet change your approach to acting?
I wish it had changed my approach to acting more than it did. I would love to play that part again. Of course, I'm far too ancient. I'm not sure I realized at the time how unbelievably deep and rich this material was. I mean, in terms of just what it is to be a human being and what human beings are capable of. I knew, what changed was I knew I could now play big parts, and like Richard II in parts, and Iguana and parts like that. But I wish I could say I got more richness out of the performance than I actually did. I got a great friend in Gemma Jones, who was my Ophelia, and she was sensational.
We're going to change tape.